Welcome to the first episode of The Unscripted Truth. I'm joined here by my co-hosts Lizzie and Alejandro.
Hi. What's up?
Today's topic, we're going to talk about the universal origins of life.
Anyway, so Richard Dawkins, a British evolutionary biologist and philosopher, he said that we are going to die. And that makes us lucky because not many... So British evolutionary biologist and philosopher Richard Dawkins once said that we are going to die. And that makes us the lucky ones because many people are never going to die because they are never going to be born. And so that got me thinking. Anyway, so for a while, I guess, I ignored that quote. And it wasn't until Carl Sagan actually said something that kind of particularly stuck with me. And it was that we are made of stardust, right? And so I didn't really understand what that meant for a while. And so then I guess I eventually looked it up. And what he meant was that... So our bodies are made out of molecules and different things and elements and stuff like that. But, even those molecules like your lipids and fats and stuff like that, they're made out of elements of their own because everything is comprised of atoms in this universe. Well, with the exception of some things, such as electromagnetic energy. And, this is... this is what happens when you're unscripted,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
If this was scripted, this would be...
Yeah. No, this would be nice. Okay. So then, what he meant was, I guess, that... Right, so there's elements, and we never really actually think about that. We just think, like, here we are, these 3D flesh bags, humans that walk upon this earth, but we don't stop and think, where do we come from? The iron in our blood, a quote by some scientists, gotta credit that later, said that the iron in our blood was formed the core of a dying star in its final days of life, because as the gravitational pressure increases, because the core of the star cannot keep creating forces of push out against these forces because it just gets weaker because it's fusing heavier elements, it gets to iron, and then that's usually when the stars die, whether they explode or whatever. Anyway, but when that happens, when the stars explode, go supernova or whatever, these elements such as oxygen, phosphorus, iron, carbon just get scattered across the universe, and they eventually find themselves in dust clouds or in these massive clouds just floating around in space,
Like the dust clouds that are there, or...
Yeah, like, eventually these elements make them...
Like when we stargaze, the dust clouds you try and find?
Yes, like the nebulas. Yes, like, eventually these elements find their ways into nebulas and stuff like that, or simply surrounding star systems after a long time, to disperse, because space is really, really huge. It's humongous. Anyway, so everything we see around us is comprised of atoms, and like we don't really ever think like exactly where all these things came from, whether it be the iron, as we said in the example before, or something even cooler, the gold, platinum, osmium, and iridium in the periodic table, that we do have trace amounts of gold in our blood, and we wear gold jewelry, and platinum is used in not platinum, rhodium is used in catalytic converters in cars, and those elements are very rare, very rare elements, because the leading theory right now is that they are formed in the collision between two neutron stars, which is so incredibly rare. And eventually those atoms, those elements find their way to these dust clouds and they start collapsing and everything. And that's when a proto sun is formed. And the same case was for Earth, I guess. Um, there must have been an abundance of dust, but in space, dust isn't what we would consider dust. It's any like rock, gas, and all that stuff like kind of mixed together. And so eventually it all comes down and it compresses and it eventually gains so much mass it ignites. And all those leftover elements left over from the sun's creation, those are what form the rest of the solar system. Its planets, its comets, asteroids, its moons. That's where Saturn got its rings from moons that formed from the debris and eventually crashed into each other, and they formed this ring system. And through the same chemistry that happened in the formation of atmospheres of the planets and through the sun, at the formation of the sun, certain chemical processes also had to happen for life to originate here on Earth. And the key elements for life right now are phosphorus, oxygen, carbon, nitrogen, carbon, like really important elements. And there was actually an experiment that was designed to kind of prove this, that life could possibly have come from elemental chemistry in the primordial soup, what we call an era in Earth's time period where it was just complete and utter chaos, but there were these elements coming down and forming organic molecules, and that's what we call the the primordial soup. Okay, and so to try to show that perhaps life originated from elemental chemistry in the Earth's early atmosphere and what we call the primordial soup, two scientists set up what would be known as the Miller-Urey experiment. And what they did was they grabbed some water and put it under a heating source, and then they connected some pipes all around it into a chamber. And there was in total 3 chambers. One held the clean water, one held just gas and a whole bunch of electrodes, which would shock the gas, replicating the conditions of Earth's early atmosphere, full of elements. So, like in one of the chambers, it holds the electrodes, and it holds some primordial gases that would have been in Earth's atmosphere, including the elements that I mentioned that were necessary for life. Under it, there was also a cooling element that would cool whatever gas flowed from there. And then the bottom chamber would hold the water that came through. So then they heated the water and it went up, and then it got to the chamber with electricity, and that water vapor was mixed in with all the elements in their gas forms that were in that chamber and were electrocuted. And the water then was cooled and turned back into liquid water. When they looked in that liquid water, they found organic compounds, organic molecules, things that would have been necessary to create the very first proteins for life. And without proteins, we wouldn't be around. Your whole body is made out of proteins, your cell walls are made out of proteins, your eyes are proteins, the lens that allows you to see out of your eyes is made out of clear protein. It's the foundation of life. And so we come forward billions of years later, to about 3 billion years from now.
And this is starting from when the Earth started getting...
Yeah, from the formation of the Earth. I'm saying like 3 billion years ago from today's present day. The first life started emerging. So from that elemental chemistry that happened, that was kind of demonstrated by the Miller-Urey experiment, the first life form started evolved, and we call this first life form Fuka, or first universal common ancestor, and it's the last ancestor in the lineage of everything that we can trace back to. Now, from Fuka, Fuka kind of evolved into 2 branches, and it was these extinct ancient viruses that just no longer exist anymore, and then Luca, which is the last universal common ancestor. So that's basically the last in the lineage of everything that still lives because those ancient viruses that Fuka evolved from just didn't survive evolution. So Luca's line of lineage is the last one. And so from that last universal common ancestor, which would have been a single-celled organism composed of proteins and maybe proto-organelles or something like that, but maybe even not even that, just kind of sat there in the ocean because at the time Earth's land wasn't really like suitable for life, but the oceans, that's where the first life emerged. It's things like cyanobacteria and stuff like that.
So, wait. So, Fuka was the first?
Yeah.
Like, out of everything
Yeah.
in the world, Fuka was first?
That we know of, yes, so far, yeah. The first universal common ancestor, yeah.
And that was mainly found for, like, bacteria? Or,
It was
like, humans, too?
It's everything. The first universal common ancestor of every life form, of everything that has ever existed on this planet.
And then it stemmed
It stemmed Luca, the last universal common ancestor. So from Luca, everything that is still alive today can be traced back to Luca.
So we could.
We could, yes.
Why can't we get traced back to Fuka?
Because remember, Fuka split into two branches. There was
Correct.
Luca, and then there was the ancient viruses. The
Right.
ancient viruses are extinct, so they're like offspring or whatever from billions of years of evolution don't exist because they died out already.
Okay, but if we can trace ourselves back to Luca,
No, we can trace ourselves back to Fuka. Just we
Yeah.
can't trace everything back to Fuka because
That's-
the ancient viruses no longer exist.
Right.
But
so like
with their fossil record and everything, obviously you could.
So with the
theoretically
with the viruses we have now, it may not go
Mm-hmm.
back to like that far because it's not
It
necessarily.
would just be something different because the ancient viruses that, it's why Luca emerged, because viruses we have now would be traced back to Luca and would also be traced back to Fuka, but these ancient viruses are just the ones that they probably existed in the beginning, they just don't exist anymore.
Right.
The first attempt of life, because viruses are just like RNA, ribonucleic acid, just in a little protein capsule. That's really all they are. Like,
Right.
they're not really considered living because they can't reproduce without a host.
Right.
That's interesting.
Right. No, it's really cool. And so now knowing that, it really puts into perspective how everything on this planet is, connected to each other, literally, like genetically. Yet there have been so much wars fought, so much killing, so much destruction, and so much conflict with humans, and we put ourselves on this pedestal as if we are the greatest species that has ever set foot here, and that we are the future and we are the past and we are now. But it's like, without all these billions of years of evolution, we really wouldn't be where we are now, and we're not even 100% sure on how exactly we, as humans, as our specific species, Homo sapien, how we are the only ones who acquired consciousness to the degree that we have it today. Because yes, you could argue that parrots and birds and stuff like that have consciousness. They are aware of their surroundings, but it's not to the level of human understanding.
It is interesting.
Agreed.
How were we so lucky?
The odds of us being, us are very slim. I think they're 0.0000 on and on until you finally hit a 1.
And then the chances of us three getting together is even lower than that.
Yeah, no, it's really crazy when you think about it, because it's like, it just doesn't feel real,
It doesn't,
It just
no.
doesn't feel real,
The hell?
And so then that's when you get into the philosophical question of, then where does religion fit into all this, specifically with the Abrahamic religions, or with really any religion depicting a view of how life started.
Right, because all religions view it kind of differently.
Right, but
And
they
none
all
of them
kind of,
really.
yeah,
Yeah.
but they all kind of have the same idea.
They have
that,
the same ideas.
that
Yes.
there's like this big
God.
deity or something, or deities that create the universe and create life, but doesn't
wonder
really
if,
say
like-
no. Yeah.
So, like, the ones that have multiple deities, right?
Mm-hmm.
What if that's using the idea, like, yes, it's their deities, it's someone, right? But what if it's actually, like, the elements of life? And their whole idea is that the elements of life came together. It's just they see it as a person.
I mean, that's something, but you also then gotta think like they wouldn't have known about things like, or maybe they could have been. No, ancient
Big
people.
question.
No, right? Because ancient people were. They had less technology than us, but they weren't stupid. So
Right.
I'm not saying that the aliens built the pyramids. I'm not.
Mm-mm.
But I'm also saying, like, science-wise, the ancient people did know something. Now that they knew specifically what was required to create life, I don't think so. I highly doubt it. But that they did know that there had to be some set condition for life to thrive in, especially from the own human experience, because, we have to evolve to survive. So our body tells us what is good and what is not.
Right.
So same idea, even if they didn't know specifically the atomic names of the elements that were required, they still had this idea that life needed a certain environment to grow in, a certain amount of food. Maybe they didn't know exactly what nutrients, minerals, elements were in these foods, but they knew that certain foods would get them to feel healthier. Certain foods would help them do this. Certain plants would endow certain effects on them, and things like that. Yeah.
Very interesting.
It's very interesting. Speaking of ancient people, and you brought up the pyramids,
Yeah.
there was a research team that someone covered a video on this, and they found the tools that they used to cut the stone blocks, but they still haven't figured out how they got them up there. And I just thought it was interesting.
Oh, a leading theory right now is that they used ramps.
You think so?
I genuinely do think so. Like, the physics allow for it. Yeah.
I can
Like
see
you
it
said,
too.
they weren't stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah,
they, were,
I can see it
they
too.
had less technology, but they weren't stupid.
But they weren't stupid.
They-
Why would they carry the things
they-
on their
right,
back
like-
when they could easily use a ramp?
Like, they could have just used geometry. Geometry is an ancient math.
Yeah.
Like, they had their knowledge of geometry, and they had their knowledge of architecture and engineering. Maybe not with the same symbols and the same mathematics that we use today, but the system that they used for them in their time, it worked for them. I mean, look, the pyramids are still standing, and it's clear and it's evident that the blocks were cut from nearby quarries of limestone and hauled over there. You also have to remember they had basically an infinite amount of slaves at their disposal, because it was the pharaoh that was commissioning the pyramids.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was just like they could just get as much slaves as they wanted, and you get a 16-ton brick, attach a few hundred people to it, easily push.
Yeah.
Easily push it along. And what's not to say that they weren't like having people trying to push it behind while other people pulled, Who was to say? Especially since the pyramids were constructed in, they were constructed in a relatively short time period in a historical sense.
Yeah.
They didn't take thousands upon thousands of years to complete, or hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds. Like the cathedral of La Sagrada Familia in Spain. They've been building it since the 1800s.
They're
Yeah.
still not done.
No, its completion is set to be completed in 2026.
I'd never even
What's
heard of
taking
that.
them so long?
I'm assuming it's just all the stone cutting, and also because it's been through. They started
It's
basically.
probably been through a heavy.
No, right. They basically started construction on it in the middle of the Industrial Revolution. So, as a new innovation came about, they probably have to install new electrical, new this, new that, to comply with the regulations, install, uninstall, because they gotta finish the structure. Like, the actual structure has to be finished first, and they gotta paint it, and stone cutting, and it's a process building a cathedral as beautiful as that one. Yeah.
I've seen pictures of cathedrals, but I've never been to one. What are they exactly?
They are the most beautiful structures humanity has ever created.
What's their purpose, though?
They're churches.
They're churches.
Gotcha.
They're just really big.
They're
churches.
really pretty.
Because usually cathedrals were put in the middle of cities, so all the little peasants and all the rich people could go, like all the people of that area could go. It wasn't like multiple churches, it was just one for everyone. So they had to make it huge.
Gotcha.
Also, you know, Catholics, the early Catholics believed that the more pristine and more glamorous their churches were, the more praise they were showing God or something like that.
Very
Gotcha.
true.
Which, I mean, can't blame them. I mean, the architecture is just it's breathtaking, you know?
Agreed.
Even smaller churches, if they have something like the church I go to has really pretty stained glass windows, and that's something that a lot of churches don't have.
Stained glass.
Stained glass is very pretty.
Alright. And so, like, forgetting about the whole hookah and Luca thing, what it really brings me to some modern time is, like, I feel like people are living in a way that it's like living as if they had an infinity of time.
Right, people think they can't die.
That they are
They're
immortal, like they are
right.
wasting their time, wasting their lives on like arrogance, on being arrogance, trying to, you know, all these social issues caused by these people who just will fight for such beliefs like so hard willingly that they're willing to harm other people, which is crazy because like once they die, once we all die, we will be either turned to ash in some crematorium or we will be buried. And eventually we will decompose. Eventually, because after hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, that coffin of yours will decompose. And you will be given to this earth. And then the trees will use your body as sustenance. It'll create fertile soil. Fungus will grow out of it, replenishing the nitrogen in the soil, making it a super fertile soil in the area where your body is buried. And then down the line, approximately 5 billion years from now, the sun, when it expands and when this earth gets incinerated and destroyed, all the atoms, all the elements that once made up the solar system, the earth, you know, this phone we're recording with, us, everything we have around us, it'll all be thrown out into the universe, and
It may be used to form again.
and it'll either form new worlds, new star, who knows, or it'll just stay there looking like a pretty cloud, just forever there, a remnant of what once was here, you know. Like what we
Was
know
life
of,
itself.
what we know of Earth as, what we know as Earth now. In the future, all that will be here is just a remnant of what used to be.
I'm pretty sure I said this to you guys before, but theoretically, if we're thinking like that, you can assume more of dying as just a losing of your consciousness.
Yeah, it's really just a losing of the conscious self, because when you die, your brain just kind of just turns off, just kind of like shutting off your computer, hitting shut down a computer.
Exactly.
Death. Now, we don't know where, what, or if anything happens to the consciousness after death, but we do know that once the physical body dies, it decomposes, and everything that is made, that it is created of, just gets sucked back by the earth and then given back to the universe at the end of its time.
We
It's
are
an
life
interesting
itself.
thought.
Yeah, we are not life, but we are,
We are the lucky ones.
the words of Richard Dawkins, or we are the universe
We should
observing itself.
Yeah.
be glad that we are privileged enough to experience death.
And it's crazy that we're like alive. Richard Dawkins also said that the amount of possible combinations allowed by the human genome outnumber the grains of sand of the Sahara Desert. Because our genome is just that big.
That's crazy.
No, right.
So legit, us being here right now is very slim to none.
It's basically impossible.
It's
you could
basically
say.
impossible.
Yeah.
It's more likely that we don't exist that we do.
And then us three meeting in high school is even less than that.
Was even
Even less, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So there's that, that really good chance that maybe we don't exist. More probable that we don't exist now when we do, given the probability, but yet we do. So that's what lays suspicion to the whole creation idea of, religion, like there has to be a creator, the universe can't be so perfectly fine-tuned and stuff like that. So yeah, and then eventually after all of this, there will be nothing. So that is the theory, that there will be nothing. And eventually,
It makes you wonder why people fight and are so serious about life then.
no, right, because I
Like,
feel like
what?
a lot of people take
Even-
life too seriously.
Even if your life, like as you grow older, is wake up, eat, work, sleep, you're still here. And even then you should be grateful, even if you don't do much.
Even if you don't do much, you don't do much, then do something about it. Like, and I know that's easier said than done, but you got one life here on this earth, and while you are experiencing in general, just gotta make the most of it, or else, well, it doesn't really matter, I
It
guess,
doesn't matter.
because you'll die eventually, and
No, but you should really make the most of it. 'Cause
make the most of it
otherwise-
while you still can, because once that light goes out, you are gone for eternity.